My. A strange weekend has come to a conclusion, and we still don't know the entire ALCS yet. The Yankees got knocked down and picked themselves up again. Where is this, Chumbawamba? No, this is the Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover. Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to the Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. This is the podcast we do. Well, I bring on this guy right over here. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sully, but you can call me Sully. And once a week, this guy comes aboard. His name is
Miller Thomas.
And you are the host of
Locked On Diamondbacks.
Look at that. We've been doing this so long, we can complete each other's sentences. You can follow this show at Locked On MLB Pods on both Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. My personal handle there is Sully Baseball on Twitter. Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Where can people follow you?
Follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account. Look up the Locked On Diamondbacks show account, Twitter, Instagram. We're, of course, on all your podcasting handles, and we're on YouTube as well. Locked On Diamondbacks there. Go hit subscribe on there as well.
All righty. Well, look at the Yankee Guardian game ended, 15 minutes ago? And we're hitting this as I am wearing the uniform, or the one-time uniform, of the American League team that is sitting at home. But, hey, give the Mariners credit. While it's been a while, if they knew they were going to lose the AL Division Series to Houston, they still came back and played 18 innings of baseball in Seattle. So they gave them the two games. They just didn't score a single run in 18 innings. I don't care who you are. That game was incredibly exciting, incredibly thrilling. Some people would probably look at it as an advertisement for the Manfred man on second base to get a run scored in there. Give both teams credit. They both pitched and played defense and did everything on the line. What is it with Houston and these huge, long playoff games? The 16-inning game in 1986, all the extra inning games against Philadelphia in 1980, a big, long extra inning game against the Chicago White Sox in the 2005 World Series. This is the second 18-inning game in Astros Division Series history. This is tied for their longest extra inning game they've played in the Division Series, because they played 8 innings in 2005 against the Atlanta Braves. What is it about Houston, these extra inning games? But, hey, give them credit. Give the Astros credit, especially because they were basically one swing away from losing game one, and they were constantly one pitch away from losing game three. And they pulled it off, and they won it.
And it helps when you have like a 6-man rotation to go 18 innings too.
Well, we'll get also to the fact that the Astros pitching depth was in many ways their greatest asset and something that haunted the team that I thought was going to go on to win the World Series. But let's talk a little bit about the game that just ended. Yankee fans can complain and will complain about a lot of things that happened over this first few games between them and the Cleveland Guardians. But one thing they cannot complain about is Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole showed up to pitch in game one. And at one point, it looked like the Guardians had him on the ropes at game one. He wiggled out of it. He got the victory. And today, after everything that happened and a somewhat depleted bullpen, exhausted bullpen after what happened in game three, you give Garrett Cole credit. He gave them 7 strong innings, letting up just 2 runs, striking out 8. He did let up the home run to Naylor. He did let up another run. There was a couple of base running blunders by Cleveland, but Cole gave them exactly what they needed. 7 innings, the 2 runs. Holmes pitched the 8th. Wandy Peralta got the save in the 9th. And pretty much you can count on everybody on the Yankee pitching staff in game 5. Cleveland once again did not have to use Clase or some of their other top relievers. So they'll all be rested and ready to go tomorrow. But tell me your thoughts about the Yankees. Give them credit. They dusted themselves off and they got off the mat, and they did what they had to do.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it all on this podcast, but it's been a weekend of upsets. So if you're a Yankees fan, you're probably feeling a little nervous before this game after seeing how the National League unfolded this past weekend. And for a Yankees fan, like you see Garrett Cole, you're paying him this fat contract, and this is the moment. This is the game where he has to step up. Max Scherzer wasn't able to do it for the New York Mets, if you want to compare and contrast that dichotomy. And Garrett Cole in this game with everything we've seen that happened this past weekend with the National League, he stepped up in a big in a big way because the Yankees team, I mean, the last two games have been like very exasperating losses for this team. You have that comeback ninth inning by the Cleveland Guardians in game 3. Game 2, you lose an extra innings to the Guardians. Like, it's been a tough back-to-back losses for the Yankees. And so you're kind of worried whether this team could rally or not. Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton haven't exactly been lighting the world on fire in the postseason. So there was a lot of question marks going into this game, and the Yankees were able to bounce back. Garrett Cole was able to do it, and the Yankees got just enough offense, jumped on Cleveland early, and was able to ride that throughout the whole game.
Yeah, and you have Game 5, which is on Monday evening on the East Coast. Shivali against Taillon. I mean, I'm sorry, that's a complete coin toss.
Yeah.
That's a complete coin toss. I mean, Taillon sometimes looked terrific, and if he pitches well, then the Yankees could very well indeed win this. If it turns into a battle of the bullpen, and we have seen that Terry Francona is willing to throw the book away when it comes to bullpen use in the postseason, it would not surprise me if he reaches down and use Henches and Morgan and Clase each for a couple of innings. In fact, I want to make this point. Going into this game, we obviously heard everything that happened where they didn't use Holmes in yesterday's game. They threw poor Clark Schmidt out there to try to close the game out. Holmes didn't know he was not going to be used. The rest of the team, Severino, didn't know they were not going to use him. And it turned into a lot of the, we can't have him pitch in X number of rounds, only use him in an emergency. Meanwhile, Francona has a history of saying, F that. Mm-hmm. We need them now. Clase pitched 2 1/3 innings in game 2 because he knew this team couldn't afford to fall behind 0-2 going back to Cleveland. So he threw that into the dumpster. And you saw he did the same thing when he would use Andrew Miller in strange situations in the 2016 postseason. The way that he brought Keith Folk in the 7th inning in a potential elimination game. Same with Papelbon in a potential elimination game when he was the manager of the Red Sox. All of we use them on this, we don't use them back-to-back and everything like that. You have to that's great in the regular season when you're trying not to burn your bullpen. You kind of have to throw that into the dumpster in the postseason and have to put yourself in a position where if you're going to die, you're going to die with your best person on the mound.
Yeah, that's what I want to see. Usually as a fan, I want to go down with my best player swing, whether it's basketball, football. I want my best players to be involved. And Tito's all about that. He's not leaving up anything for chance for the margins. He's letting his best players just ride it out throughout the whole game. And for this Yankees team, I mean, it's going to be a pretty big game 5 for them because it's going to be a lot of question marks like all these top teams have lost in this postseason. Like if the Yankees team loses in game 5, like going to the offseason, I don't know what kind of shakeup they're going to do. Maybe Aaron Boone gets fired. What happens to Aaron Judge? Like there's a lot of big implications if this Yankees team is not able to make it out the divisional series and is not able to win, one playoff series this whole run. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in game 5. I think we're going to see maybe like a reverse bullpen kind of game like you talked about where the starters, you would love if they could go 6 innings, but realistically if you could get 3 good innings out of both your starters, and then I think this is going to be a full bullpen game by both teams, and it's going to be whichever bullpen wins. And so we'll see what happens in that scenario. Like you say, Cleveland rested up their guys, so I think they probably got a little bit of advantage tomorrow. But where's the game being played? It's going to be back in New York, correct?
Back in New York. It would not surprise me if Shane Bieber comes out of the bullpen either.
Yeah.
And you saw in that game 3 that if Boone knew that they weren't going to use Holmes, then why did they only get 1 out of Trevino? Why did they pull Loizica after only 20-something pitches? You would think if he knew that he was going to be shorthanded in the bullpen, he would try to squeeze some extra outs out of those guys. But that's the beauty of baseball, is that game's already in the rearview mirror. And you talk about all these things that could happen to the Yankees if they get eliminated this round. Well, guess what? They're playing this afternoon, or they're playing Monday afternoon. And if they win, and it's a complete coin toss game. I mean, there's absolutely no way you can lean one way or the other. And Shivali is okay. Tyone is okay. Both bullpens are rested. Both offenses are complete opposites. One is a slug them out, hit home runs. The other is grind it out, blue pit. Neither one of us know what's going to happen. If they advance and they go to the ALCS against Houston, well, then they're in a position where you'd have to praise Boone. You'd have to praise the Yankees for dusting themselves off and getting themselves in this position.
Yeah, but if I'm going into a do or die game and I'm looking at the players, I'm saying everything's equal going into this game. And now I have to rely on my managers to make the best decisions within the game, which one's going to be more tactical. I'm putting my life on the line with Terry Francona every time over Aaron Boone to make those right decisions, to make the right calls and put my team in a better situation. So if we're saying the players and those situations are going to be equal, it might come down to the managerial experience here. And I think it's Terry Francona by a mile.
So what you're telling me is if you have to make a bet on one of those two teams, you would put your bet on Cleveland. And if you're going to make any bets, go to betonline.net. It's your number one source for football betting this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball playoffs, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. All right, let's just stop and think about this. I talked about this on Sundays. I posted a show on Sunday because I had to address what was happening. I don't know what's going to happen in the American League. Cleveland could win. And so far, my predictions in the American League have been accurate. I said Seattle was going to beat Toronto. I thought Cleveland was going to beat Tampa. And I thought Houston was going to beat Seattle. And I picked Cleveland over New York. And that could very well happen. But so far, I'm pretty accurate on what I said in the American League. The National League, I thought St. Louis was going to beat Philadelphia. I said the Mets were going to beat the Padres, and I said we're going to have an NLCS between Los Angeles and Atlanta. So I have been 100% wrong across the board in the National League. And we now know that the 2022 World Series will feature either the Philadelphia Phillies or the San Diego Padres. Two sub-90 win teams, two very flawed teams, one of who finished one game ahead of the Milwaukee Brewers for the third wild card spot. And here we are. And the nice thing about it is that they're both underdogs and that they're both, I guess, feel-good stories. But what is your take on the fact that the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Atlanta Braves, I mean, the Braves got thumped.
Yeah.
They got thumped. They lost one of the games 9-1, and they got clobbered in the final game. Now, Los Angeles didn't get clobbered, but the Goose showed up. They lost. The Padres rallied to win game 2. The Dodgers offense was MIA for game 3. And then the bullpen fell apart big time in the clincher at Petco on Saturday evening. What is your thoughts on what, I mean, has to be the most shocking, San Diego against LA? That has to be the most shocking of the upsets that have happened so far this October.
Yeah, if I took a shot for every NL series I predicted correctly, I would be a sober man, Sully, because it's been upsets galore and it's been very unpredictable. Because let's start with that Dodgers series, because let's be honest, the Dodgers choke down this series. They
Yes.
won the first game. When you look at this whole entire season by the Dodgers, statistically, this was one of the greatest regular season teams we've ever saw.
Ever.
Set the franchise record in wins. They had like the fourth best like run differential of all time. Like this was the team that was number one in runs scored and number one in team ERA in the entire Major League Baseball. And so for this Dodgers team to go out there and win game one against the Padres, I was out there tweeting on Twitter, it's going to be another big brother versus little brother series with the Dodgers taking down the Padres. And what did the Padres do? The next 3 games, they just absolutely controlled the series. Once again, Clayton Kershaw in game 2, I mean, he wasn't shut down Clayton Kershaw like he normally is in the postseason. Like he didn't step up in the way you needed him to. Game 3, the Padres were able to win that and able to win game 4. I don't remember exactly what happened. I'll have to look at my notes, but the Padres
They rallied in the they had a 5 or 6 run rally in the 7th inning.
Yes, I just took a look at my notes. You had Blake Snell absolutely work the Dodgers in game 3 because Blake Snell, he's a guy who I didn't trust, but he was going to be a huge X factor in this series because in non-career starts against the Dodgers entering that game 3, he had a 2.5 ERA. We know what he did against the Dodgers in the World Series against 2020. So Blake Snell is someone that has had a great track record against the Dodgers. He showed up in a big way. And then, of course, Joe Musgrove. Joe Musgrove has been a huge big game pitcher for the Padres this series. He came through in game 4. And like you said, the Padres had that insane rally started by the bottom of the order because Trent Grisham has been quietly a superstar for the Padres during this postseason because guys like Juan Soto, I almost said Manny Machado. Guys like Juan Soto have been pretty quiet, but the Jay Cronenworths of the world, the Jeraxon Profars, the Trent Grishams, has been the other pieces, the complementary pieces for the Padres offense that were able to come through in this series. And it's been really crazy to see. Guys like Mookie Betts weren't really able to be found. They were on a milk car in this series. So Mookie Betts is still made man, but the Dodgers really choked down this series after the incredible year that they had. And then moving to the Braves versus Phillies series, like the Braves, I felt like the Phillies stole that game 1 and it set the tone for the whole series because Max Fried, he's their best postseason pitcher. He's their number 1 starter, and he kind of fumbled the bag in game 1. And then the Phillies were just able to dump them, scored at least 7 runs in 3 of the 4 games. I felt like the Braves were just mentally stumped by that game 4. Defensive miscues in the outfield, allowed inside the park home runs. Everything was just disgusting in that game 4 for the Braves. You had Ronald Acuna making mistakes. He was like 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. I was surprised by both of these results, more by the Dodgers one because they were so dominant this regular season. But let's not forget this Braves team, like we've talked about, was probably the best team in Major League Baseball the last 2/3 of the season. So these were 2 Giants that just lost to teams that had 15 less wins than that they had. So just craziness what we've seen in this MLB playoff so far, and it's going to be exciting to see 2 underdogs in the Padres and Phillies, who kind of have like cursed franchises historically. The Padres have been kind of weird, only been to the playoffs like 4 times the last 24 years. The Phillies had the longest NL playoff drought. The last 12 years they haven't made it, 11 years, something like that. So it's crazy to see that these 2 teams are now meeting in the championship series after being sub 90 and going through the last 20 years that they've had.
It's funny, like going into when we were approaching down the stretch in the postseason, and it looked like the Mets were going to win the division. I was saying the Mets should be the favorite, and the main reason that I had the Mets over Los Angeles in my thoughts for the playoff predictions was the fact that as great as the Dodgers regular season was, and it was great, there's no getting around that. The fact that Walker Buehler was hurt and Tony Gonsolin basically didn't pitch for a month and a half heading into the postseason. He only pitched a handful of innings. I thought that suddenly that made their starting pitching depth remarkably thinner than some of the other teams. They still had Tyler Anderson, who was good. They still had Urias, who was good. They had Kershaw, who had a fine season, not Cy Young Kershaw, but he's 34. He's in the back 9 of his career. But I thought it was a lot of banking on the Mitch Whites and the Andrew Heaney's, and that there was. I didn't look at this team as having the pitching depth they needed. They also didn't have a reliable closer since Kimbrel, I believe, was left off of the playoff roster.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of coin tosses in the bullpen. And I thought, okay, once New York was eliminated, I really thought it was okay. Well, it's a clear path. And when you consider the fact that the Dodgers beat the Padres 14 out of 19 times in the
Yeah,
regular season, think about
insane.
that. In the regular season, the Dodgers lost 5 games to the Padres. In the postseason, they almost tied that number with 3. I mean, this looked like such a it looked like such a mismatch going into it. I think I predicted a sweep.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you did. And really, we just touched on with the Dodgers bullpen, it was kind of a weakness and a flaw that we really didn't discuss maybe too much when evaluating this Dodgers team. And then on the other side, this Padres bullpen was straight up nasty in this Dodgers series. Like they were barely allowing any men on the bases. Josh Hader, 3 saves, was able to close out every time he came into the ball game, and he was a huge question mark throughout the regular season after being acquired because he had his ups and downs, as we know. So the fact that Josh Hader was able to get back into form and look like that dominant closer that we saw back in Milwaukee, that is a huge sign for this Padres team, and it could be a huge reason as to why they're not only in the championship series and to see how far they can go if they can, make it past the Phillies or not.
And obviously they have Darvish and they have
Mhm.
Musgrove pitching in there. But let's not take a look away from the third place Phillies. I'm sorry, I'm calling them that. The third place Phillies, who obviously have an offense that's clicking on all cylinders, but they also have Wheeler and Nola, who are both pitching very, very well. And the top of their rotation is airtight right now. And so I mean, they're 3 or 4 in their rotation, maybe a little bit of a coin toss, but you're looking at 2 teams that on paper look flawed in the Padres and the Phillies. And I mean, this is an impossible one to pick because they both have decent pitching. They both came off mind-boggling upsets against a division rival in the division series, and they both are filled with they have superstars who were acquired in big free agent contracts who are looking at this as being their big sort of explosion to the post. I mean, either Bryce Harper or Manny Machado are going to be in the World Series this year. The big, huge honking free agent signings of 2019, the 2 players that were left dangling on the vine until spring training started. One of them is going to be playing in the World Series in 2022, and ergo, in so many ways, justify that big, massive contract. Because when you think about both of those teams, San Diego and Philadelphia, when they made those free agent signings just prior to the beginning of the 2019 season, that was a shot to the fans to say, we know we haven't been in the World Series forever. We know we've given you a rotten decade of baseball. We're bringing in a superstar in their prime, and we're buying out the rest of their prime to play in your home field. And one of them is going to follow through in their promise of delivering either the freaking Phillies or Padres to the World Series this year. And whatever happens to the rest of the contract, they could say, hey, look it, we were one of those afterthought franchises, and we got a World Series appearance out of this contract. I mean, that's just a huge moment for those 2 players. Not to mention the JT Realmutos and the Zach Wheelers, or the Juan Soto, all the big deals that San Diego made. That will suddenly make their trade deadline. Remember, everyone was crapping on their trade deadlines. Oh, they made all the big splashes, but look at that. They fell out of the race and they had to scramble for a wild card spot. Well, they're 4 wins away from the World Series right now.
Yay for free agency and spending money and being aggressive, because small market teams are just cheap owners. They want to have all the reasons and all the excuses. Look at that team. They paid all that money for that player, and look at where they are. They're not even in the postseason. Well, screw all that, because you look at this Padres team, you look at these Phillies team, they spent so much money the last few off seasons. AJ Preller has been one of the most aggressive GMs in baseball, and he's been retooling and tiddling this roster for a while now. And now they're here in this championship series. The Phillies kind of did it in 1 year, well, maybe not 1 year, because they've done it over the last couple off seasons with the Bryce Harper signings, like you mentioned, Nick Castellanos signing a big bat like him as well. So these
Kyle
2
Schwarber.
teams, yeah,
Schwarber
Yeah, and I was also thinking about this. Like if this Phillies team gets to the World Series, I know we all love Theo Epstein as the main guy to build. If I had to take a roster from scratch and end a curse of a franchise, which GM, which executive do I want building out my roster? Theo
Dave
Epstein.
Dombrowski.
Yep, Dave Dombrowski might be the new. He might be right there with Theo Epstein. He might be on the Mount Rushmore guys. I don't know where he lands, but when you've seen what he's done with the Red Sox and the Marlins and the Tigers and this team and that team, like how many World Series, how many great rosters has this guy put together? So he's got to be on the Mount Rushmore or something. But for this Phillies team right now, they kind of remind me of last year's Red Sox team who got hot via the offense, starting pitching. You kind of relied on two frontline starters with a very iffy bullpen because this Phillies team, you look at that game 4, Noah Syndergaard only pitched like 3 innings, and then they kind of went the bullpen route, and the bullpen was like all okay in that game. Like the bullpen was like all right in the series. They were good just enough, but it was really the Phillies offense that was able to just, you didn't need a bullpen if you're going to put up almost 7 runs or more every game. So I wonder if this Phillies offense is going to take a step back, what they do if they cool off, because I don't know if they have the bullpen to hold off the Padres bats. If this Phillies team is not putting up at least, 4 to 5 runs a game, I don't know if they have the bullpen arms to hold off a Padres offense. So that's what I'm really looking for. Can this Phillies offense continue to extend this hot streak that they're on? Because if they take a step back, can their pitching hold it up? Because I love their 2 starters, Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, but I don't know how I feel about the rest of the bullpen.